I found them huddled under a highway bridge in the pouring rain. The man was clutching a feverish baby to his chest, both soaked to the bone. This wasn't just any homeless man, this was my grandson. For 30 years, I'd believed my son's betrayal was the worst pain I would ever feel. The emptied accounts, my husband's heart attack when he discovered the theft, the decades of isolation. I never imagined I'd stand in the mud under that concrete overpass, rain soaking through my expensive coat, staring into my husband's eyes in a stranger's face. "James Sterling?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the storm. He looked up, suspicious and protective. "Who are you?" he demanded, shielding his baby daughter from this strange woman appearing out of nowhere. "My name is Alice Sterling," I said, crouching down to his level. "I know your father told you I was dead, but I am your grandmother." The look on his face in that moment told me everything was about to change. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We're creating a community of incredible people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now, back to the story. I've kept the plastic folder on my desk for 3 days. Black, unremarkable, thin enough to slide between the pages of a book and disappear. My assistant had placed it there without comment, knowing better than to mention what it contained. 3 mornings I've had my coffee at this desk, pushed papers around it, made calls, all while pretending it wasn't there. Today, I'm tired of pretending. The Atlantic stretches beyond my windows, a brilliant blue canvas beneath the Florida sun. I designed this penthouse myself after Spencer died. All white marble, glass and steel, clean lines, nothing unnecessary, nothing to catch dust or memories. I've lived here for 28 years now. Sometimes I still feel like a visitor. I lift the folder. It's lighter than it should be considering what it contains. $30,000 for a 6-page report and 1 photograph. I suppose information doesn't weigh much these days. Inside is exactly what I expected. The final report from Decker Investigations. Decker himself is retired now. His son handled this one, less thorough than his father, but discreet. The Sterling name still opens doors even in my semi-retirement. The company runs itself now, more or less. I only intervene when the board gets sentimental about the old properties. Sentiment is the enemy of sound business. The first page is a summary named James Spencer Sterling, age 28. Occupation, factory worker, terminated. Current residence, unhoused. Location, Columbus, Ohio. Below that, the line my eyes can't seem to move past. Parents Gregory and Brendan Sterling. Estranged. My coffee has gone cold. I push it aside. I knew he existed, of course. I'd hired the first investigator when Gregory disappeared with our money. By then, Brendan was already pregnant. I wanted to know where they went, what they did. With Spencer's retirement fund, with the emergency accounts, with the bonds meant for our grandchildren's education, I found them living comfortably in Seattle. Gregory was working at an investment firm, using Spencer's connections, using our name. I shut the investigation down after Spencer's funeral. There seemed little point after that. But 3 weeks ago, something woke me at 2 under a.m., the kind of waking where you're suddenly completely alert. Spencer used to say it was someone walking over your grave. I got up, made tea, and sat in my kitchen, feeling like I was waiting for something. By morning, I'd called Decker's son and given him Gregory's name. I didn't know what I expected to find after all these years. I didn't expect this. The report is methodical, a chronicle of systematic collapse. James Sterling, born in Seattle, moved to Ohio at age 6. Average student, no criminal record. Married at 22 to Olivia Whitman. Daughter born 16 months ago, Sophie Marie Sterling. Employed at Midwest Manufacturing for 5 years. Recently laid off due to plant downsizing. And then the unraveling. Wife leaves with another man. James loses apartment due to missed payments. Car repossessed. Applies for shelter space. Waitlisted due to overcrowding. Makes phone call to parents requesting temporary housing assistance. Request denied. I read this last line twice. Request denied. So cold, those two words. So familiar. Gregory denying his own son shelter, just as he denied us any explanation when he cleaned out our accounts and vanished. Some patterns never break. The final page of the report is the photograph. Grainy, taken from a distance. A man sits hunched under the concrete ceiling of a highway overpass. Dark hair, thin frame. He's cradling something to his chest, a bundle wrapped in what looks like a faded blue jacket. A small hand is visible, reaching up toward his face. I set the picture down carefully, as if it might crumble between my fingers. I'm back in our old house on Havenwood Drive. 30 years vanish like smoke. The house is too quiet when I open the door. Spencer's car is in the garage, but he doesn't answer when I call. I find him in his study, staring at the open safe in the wall. Empty. The antique desk where he'd kept his grandfather's pocket watch, the drawers hanging open. I remember how he didn't turn when I entered, how he just kept staring at the empty safe. Gregory took it all, he said. Not a question. His voice was flat, like he was commenting on the weather. I called the bank, called our accountant, called Gregory's phone over and over. No answer. By the time I looked back at Spencer, his color had changed. Gray like old paper, his left hand clutching his chest, his right hand reaching toward me. I couldn't reach the phone in time. The doctor called it a massive coronary, natural causes, nothing anyone could have done. I knew better. Spencer Sterling died of a broken heart, sitting in his favorite leather chair, betrayed by the son who'd been the center of his world. The memory retreats, leaving me back in my silent penthouse. The folder is still open, the photograph still staring up at me. James and Sophie Sterling, Spencer's grandson, Spencer's great-granddaughter, living under a bridge because Gregory denied them shelter. For 30 years, I've been a ghost in my own life. Running Havenwood Properties was just something to fill the days after Spencer was gone. I stopped caring about most things, stopped having people over, stopped celebrating holidays. The women in my charity committees called me an ice queen behind my back. I never corrected them, but ice can preserve things like rage, like purpose. I close the folder with a soft thud. The decision feels like waking up from a long sleep. I press the intercom button on my desk phone. Margaret, I need the jet prepared and call Arthur at the car service. I'll need transportation in Columbus, Ohio. Yes, Mrs. Sterling. When will you be departing? I look at the black folder once more. Tomorrow morning. And Margaret, pack my suitcase for at least a week, weather appropriate for Ohio this time of year. Of course. Will anyone be accompanying you? No, this is personal. I end the call and walk to the window. 65 floors below, people move like insects, so small from this height, so easy to forget they have lives as complicated as my own. For decades, I've kept myself above it all. Detached, safe. That ends tomorrow. I press my palm against the cool glass. I'm 78 years old. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I have a company that bears my husband's family name. What I don't have is much time left or anything resembling family. The man under that bridge doesn't know I exist. His father probably told him I was dead, just as he told me they'd moved abroad. Another of Gregory's convenient lies. James doesn't know about Spencer, about Havenwood, about his legacy. He doesn't know that his eyes, if they're anything like the ones in his driver's license photo from the report, are the same deep brown as my husband's. He doesn't know, but he will. I haven't prayed since Spencer's funeral, haven't believed in much of anything, but standing here looking out at the vastness of the ocean, I find myself hoping that some trace of Spencer lives in that young man, that Gregory's poison hasn't reached all the way down to the next generation. Tomorrow I'll find out. Tomorrow I'll meet the last of the Steerings, even if he doesn't know that's what he is. The jet's engines hummed at a pitch I'd long ago stopped noticing. 6 hours from West Palm to Columbus. 6 hours to question my own sanity. Outside my window, clouds stretched like a white carpet below us. I'd left my untouched lunch tray on the side table, some artfully arranged salmon dish that Margaret had ordered. Food held no interest. I was running on black coffee and determination, both bitter and necessary. The cabin attendant appeared at my elbow. "Mrs. Sterling, we will be landing in 20 minutes. Your car is confirmed and waiting." "Thank you, Jessica. The weather in Columbus is not ideal. Heavy rain. Would you like me to arrange for anything additional?" "No, I packed appropriately." She nodded and retreated. I'd employed her for nearly a decade, and she still treated me with the cautious deference of a new hire. I suppose I've cultivated that response. Easier that way, fewer questions. The jet began its descent, banking through thick cloud cover. When we broke through, Ohio spread beneath us, flat, gray, and unremarkable. Nothing like the vivid blues and greens of Florida. This landscape matched my mood perfectly. Thomas was waiting as promised, standing beside a black Lincoln with an Saudi umbrella at the ready. He'd driven for me in 6 different cities over the years. Never asked questions, never offered unnecessary conversation. The perfect employee. "Mrs. Sterling," he said with a small nod as he held the door. "Thomas, good to see you again." "Where to, ma'am?" I handed him a folded piece of paper with the coordinates marked. He glanced at it, his expression unchanging. "Of course, should be about 30 minutes." The car slid away from the private aviation terminal. Merging onto the highway, Columbus looked like dozens of other mid-sized American cities I'd visited on business. Same chain restaurants, same car dealerships, same billboards promising relief from debt, disease, and despair. The sameness was almost comforting in its predictability. Then we turned east, and the scenery began to change. The first signs were subtle, more potholes in the road. Fewer new buildings, then more obvious markers, payday loan centers, liquor stores with barred windows, empty lots where businesses had once stood. Rain began to fall, light at first, then with increasing intensity. The windshield wipers created a hypnotic rhythm against the glass. Slap, 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 slap. I've owned property in neighborhoods like this. Early in my career, I'd walk the streets myself, identifying buildings to acquire. Spencer always said I had an eye for potential beneath decay. But those were business trips, clinical assessments of value. This was different. Somewhere in this forgotten place was my grandson. My grandson. The words still felt foreign in my mind. The car slowed as we approached a massive concrete overpass. The highway above us roared with the constant flow of traffic, amplified by the heavy rain drumming on our roof. Through the street windows, I could make out a small encampment tucked against one of the support pillars. A blue tarp, some kind of tent, piles of what might have been possessions or just debris. Thomas pulled onto the muddy shoulder, the tires squelching in the wet earth. The engine idled smoothly as he turned to face me. "Ma'am, this doesn't look—" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Safe. If you'll tell me what you need, I can go for you." "No, Thomas." My voice came out sharper than I'd intended. Softer, I added, "This one is mine." His face betrayed nothing. "I'll keep the car running." I withdrew my umbrella from its sleeve and opened the door. The sound of the rain was deafening, a roar punctuated by the thunder of trucks passing overhead. The smell hit me immediately. Wet earth, exhaust, and something else. The particular staleness of poverty. My shoes, Italian leather, sensible but expensive, sank immediately into the mud. I didn't allow myself to hesitate. I began walking toward the encampment, my umbrella, a flimsy shield against the downpour. Water splashed against my ankles with each step, soaking through my pants despite my careful tread. The area beneath the bridge was a patchwork of puddles and refuse, fast food wrappers, broken glass, a shopping cart tipped on its side, and there against the concrete pillar, a small tent, its thin fabric rippling in the occasional gusts of wind that swept under the overpass. I was halfway there when I heard it, a thin cry barely audible above the storm. A baby's cry, not the healthy wail of a tantrum, but the weak, exhausted sound of genuine discomfort, of need. My pace quickened, despite the treacherous footing. As I drew closer, I could see the tent flap was partially open. Inside, a man knelt, with his back to me. His shoulders were hunched, his spine visible through his thin t-shirt as he bent over something in his arms. His movements were gentle but desperate, the rhythmic rocking of someone trying to soothe the child. I stopped, just outside the entrance. For a moment, I stood frozen, the full weight of what I was doing suddenly real. I wasn't looking at a report anymore. This wasn't an abstract problem to solve. James Sterling. He whipped around, the movement so sharp it seemed painful. One arm instinctively tightened around the bundle he held. The other braced against the ground as if ready to flee. His face, God, his face beneath the stubble and exhaustion. I could see Spencer, the same strong jawline, the same deep-set eyes, now weary and defensive. "Who are you?" His voice was rough, either from disuse or illness. The baby in his arms squirmed, her cries growing more insistent. She was wrapped in what appeared to be a man's jacket, far too large for her tiny frame. Her face was red, her dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, despite the chill in the air. Without thinking, I stepped forward and adjusted my umbrella, angling it to cover the tent opening completely. Rain immediately began pelting my shoulders and head, but I hardly noticed. "She's hot," I said, nodding toward the child. "Fever." Confusion flashed across his face. "What do you want? We don't have anything." "I'm not here to take anything from you." I crouched down, bringing myself to his eye level, ignoring the mud soaking into my knees. "My name is Alice Sterling." Nothing. No recognition in his eyes. I'm your grandmother." He stared at me, confusion giving way to suspicion. "That's not possible," he said flatly. "My grandparents are dead, both sides." "Your father told you that about me, at least." I held his gaze steadily. Gregory lied. At the mention of his father's name, something shifted in his expression. Not softening exactly, but a different kind of weariness. I don't know what kind. "Of scam this is, but I'm not interested." He started to turn away, then stopped as the baby let out another cry. This one more urgent. "She needs a doctor," I said quietly. "You think I don't know that?" The words burst from him, raw with frustration and fear. "The ER said it's just a cold. They gave me some children's Tylenol and sent us away. She's been like this for 3 days." I studied him for a moment. "When did you last eat, James?" He looked away. "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." "Yesterday, maybe." His jaw tightened. "Look, I appreciate the concern, but I have a car waiting." I interrupted. "It's warm, dry, there's food, and I can have a pediatrician meet us at my hotel within the hour." He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Right. And what do you want in return?" "Nothing you aren't willing to give." I leaned slightly forward. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to make a practical decision for your daughter's sake." The baby's cries had subsided to whimpering. She looked utterly spent. "Sophie," he said softly, looking down at her. "Her name is Sophie." "Sophie," I repeated. The name felt strange on my tongue. Unfamiliar, yet somehow right. Spencer would have liked that name. "Who?" "Your grandfather, my husband." He studied my face, searching for something. A tell, perhaps, or some sign of deceit. What he saw instead must have been exhaustion equal to his own. "1 hour, he finally said. "We'll go to your hotel. Sophie sees a doctor. Then we talk. If I don't like what I hear, we walk." I nodded once, agreed. He gathered a small backpack, all his possessions in the world, I realized, and struggled to his feet while keeping Sophie secure against his chest. I noticed how he swayed slightly, steadying himself against the tent pole. "Do you need help?" I asked. "I can carry my own daughter," he replied, pride stiffening his spine. Momentarily, we walked back to the car in silence, the rain still pounding around us. Thomas saw us approaching and quickly exited to open the rear door. If he was surprised by my companions, he didn't show it. As James slid into the warm interior of the car, still clutching Sophie to his chest, I caught a glimpse of his face in the dim light. For just a moment, the weariness fell away, replaced by sheer relief. It was the look of someone who had been drowning and finally touched solid ground. I followed him into the car, closing my umbrella and leaving it dripping on the floor mat. The Granville Hotel. "Thomas, call Dr. Winters. Tell her it's urgent." As the car pulled away from the curb, I glanced back at the small tent, already collapsing under the weight of the rain. It would be gone by morning, washed away as if it had never existed, as if they had never been there at all. Some ghosts refuse to be forgotten. I watched James from across the hotel suite as Dr. Winters examined Sophie. The transformation from the bridge to this moment had been swift and disorienting for him most of all. Less than 3 hours ago, they'd been huddled under that concrete overpass. Now, Sophie lay on crisp white sheets while a pediatrician listened to her chest. "Respiratory infection," Dr. Winters confirmed, removing her stethoscope. "She needs antibiotics immediately. I've brought some with me to start." She looked directly at James. "You got her help just in time, Mr. Sterling." James hadn't let go of Sophie's tiny hand throughout the examination. "Will she be okay with proper care?" "Absolutely. She needs warmth, rest, medication, and good nutrition." Dr. Winters glanced my way. "Mrs. Sterling says you'll be traveling to Florida tomorrow." James looked at me, uncertainty plain on his face. "Only if Sophie is well enough," I said. "And only if that's what James decides." Dr. Winters nodded. "The private flight would actually be better than commercial travel. Less exposure to other illnesses. I'll provide detailed instructions for care during the journey." After she left, James sat on the edge of the bed, Sophie cradled against him. She'd fallen into a more peaceful sleep after taking the medicine. The silence between us stretched, filled with unasked questions. "There's food," I said finally, gesturing to the room service cart I'd ordered while the doctor was examining Sophie. "You should eat something." He looked at the covered dishes, then back at Sophie. I understood his reluctance to put her down even for a moment. "May I?" I asked, holding out my arms. His hesitation was brief but noticeable. Then, carefully, he transferred his daughter to my arms. I settled into an armchair, supporting her head in the crook of my elbow. "Eat," I said. "I've got her." He ate like a man who hadn't seen food in days, which was likely the case. I kept my eyes on Sophie, giving him the dignity of not watching. His hunger. Her small weight in my arms felt both strange and familiar. It had been decades since I'd held a baby. Gregory, then some friends' children, then no one. The thought of Gregory threatened to surface, but I pushed it away. Not now. "Why are you doing this?" James asked finally, his voice low. "It's complicated," I replied. "And you need rest more than explanations tonight. Tomorrow on the plane, we can talk." He studied me for a long moment. "I don't understand any of this. Why would my father lie about you being dead? Why would you come find us now?" "Those are fair questions, but they have long answers." I looked down at Sophie, then back at him. "James, I'm offering you and Sophie a safe place to stay at my home in Florida. Not permanently, not with strings. Just a place to recover and figure out your next steps. If you decide to leave at any point, I'll arrange transportation wherever you want. To go. Just like that. No conditions. Just like that. Why should I trust you?" I met his gaze directly. "You shouldn't necessarily. You barely know me. But consider the practical reality. Your daughter is getting the medical care she needs. You have a safe place to sleep tonight. Tomorrow, you can make your next decision." He nodded slowly, the exhaustion finally overtaking his weariness. Within an hour, both he and Sophie were asleep, and I made arrangements for our departure. Havenwood Estate appeared through the car windows as we rounded the final curve of the drive. The main house stood as it had for 70 years, white columns, wide verandas, windows that caught the late afternoon sun. I watched James's face as he took it in, his expression a mix of awe and apprehension. "This is where you live?" he asked, Sophie secure in his arms. "This is where Spencer and I lived," I corrected gently. "Your grandfather built this place the year before we married." The car stopped at the front entrance. Inside, everything was prepared. A nursery had been set up adjacent to the guest suite in the east wing. Maria, the nanny I'd arranged, would be arriving in an hour. Dr. Leon, the local pediatrician, would check on Sophie that evening. James stepped into the foyer, his movements cautious, as if he might break something simply by existing in the space. Sophie, still recovering but improving with the antibiotics, made a small sound against his shoulder. "Let me show you where you'll be staying," I said. I led him through the house to the east wing, deliberately avoiding the formal areas. The guest suite I chose was comfortable, but not overwhelming. A bedroom with an adjoining sitting area, neutral colors, windows overlooking the gardens. The connecting nursery was simple but complete. A crib, changing table, rocking chair. "Maria will be here soon," I explained. "She's not here to take over. She's here so you can rest when you need to." James stood in the center of the room looking lost. "There are clothes in the dresser," I continued. "Basic things, t-shirts, jeans. The kitchen downstairs is always open. Your rooms have a lock." I produced a smartphone from my pocket. "This has my number programmed in. Call or text any time, day or night." He accepted the phone with his free hand. I don't know what to say. "You don't need to say anything. Get settled. Rest. That's all that matters right now." For 3 days, James kept mostly to his rooms. Maria reported that Sophie was improving rapidly with the medication and proper care. I gave them space, recognizing that James needed time to decompress and assure himself this wasn't some elaborate trap. On the 4th evening, I was sitting in the sunroom with tea and one of Spencer's old photo albums when I sensed a presence. James stood in the doorway, hesitant. "May I join you?" he asked. "Please." I gestured to the chair opposite mine. Sophie was asleep. Finally, Maria showed me how to use the baby monitor. He glanced at the device on the side table. "It's taking. Some getting used to. Having help?" I nodded, pouring him tea the way I'd noticed he liked it. No sugar, splash of milk. "Did you get a chance to explore the grounds today?" "A little. I walked down to the pond." He accepted the cup with a nod of thanks. "This place is incredible." "It wasn't always like this," I said, seeing an opening. I slid the photo album toward him. "Did you know your grandfather built houses with his own hands before he ever managed a company?" James looked surprised. "No, my father never talked about him, about either of you." I opened the album to a photograph of Spencer in work clothes, kneeling on a roof with a hammer in his hand. His smile was wide, genuine. Spencer grew up poor in Georgia. His father was a carpenter who taught him the trade. When Spencer moved to Florida in the 40s, he started building simple homes for veterans returning from the war. I turned the page to show a row of modest houses. These were the first Havenwood properties. Nothing fancy, but solid, built to last. James studied the photos, his fingers hovering just above the surface, not quite touching. "He looks happy." He was happiest when working with his hands. I turned another page. This was our first real office, just a converted storage room with a telephone. Spencer would say, "Havenwood doesn't build houses. We build the place where a family feels safe." James looked up. "Is that why you came to get us? Because of what he believed?" The The directness of the question caught me off guard. Partly, I admitted, but it's more complicated than that. My father, he said, his voice hardening slightly. What did he do to you? I closed the album gently. There are gaps in our family history, James. 30 years of them. Your father made sure of that. We never knew about you growing up. We never saw your childhood photos. That's something I can never get back. He was quiet for a long moment. You said we? You and my grandfather? Yes. Spencer never knew you existed. He died shortly after your father left. Something shifted in his expression. I'm sorry. So am I. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Your father made choices I don't understand. But Spencer, he was a good man, the best I've ever known. He would have moved heaven and earth to know you. Later that night, I was passing the nursery when I heard it. A soft, low humming. James was rocking Sophie, singing something gentle and wordless. The melody caught in my chest like a physical pain. Spencer used to hum that same tune while working in his study, concentrating on blueprints late into the night. I moved away quietly, not wanting to intrude on the moment. Downstairs, I walked through the silent house, my fingers trailing along the walls. For 30 years, Havenwood had been a museum to what I'd lost. Tonight, for the first time, it felt like something else. A home. The Florida morning was bright and warm, the kind of crystalline clarity only found in October after the worst of the summer heat had broken. I sat across from James at the small breakfast table on the patio, watching him spread jam on a piece of toast for Sophie. She sat in a high chair, babbling happily, a far cry from the feverish, listless baby I'd first met under that bridge 6 months ago. 6 months. Sometimes it felt like days, other times like years. James had filled out, his once gaunt face now healthy, his eyes clear. He'd found a routine here, morning walks with Sophie around the estate grounds, helping Maria with household projects in the afternoons. He read voraciously from Spencer's library. He was healing, but I could see the restlessness beginning to take hold. A man like James needed purpose. Have you thought about what's next? I asked, keeping my tone casual as I sipped my coffee. He looked up, his expression guarded. I've been applying for jobs online, factory work mostly. There's a manufacturing plant about 20 miles from here that's hiring. I nodded, considering his words. That's certainly an option. Sophie smashed her toast with delight, and James gently wiped her tiny fingers. The love and attention he showed her never wavered. It reminded me of Spencer, that same quiet, unwavering devotion. May I make an observation? I asked. Of course. Havenwood Properties has 100 agents who can sell a 4-bedroom house. What? We don't have enough people who understand what turns it into a home. I set my coffee cup down. You had a home ripped away from you. You fought to make a home for your daughter under a bridge. You understand this better than any MBA I could hire. His brow furrowed slightly. What are you suggesting? We have an opening for an assistant project manager, entry level, long hours, not particularly glamorous work. I held his gaze steadily. This isn't a gift, James. It's an opportunity. You would start at the bottom. No one would know who you are. Your success or failure would be entirely your own. He was quiet for a long moment, absently helping Sophie with her sippy cup. I don't have any experience in real estate. Neither did Spencer when he started building homes for veterans. I smiled slightly, but you have something more valuable: perspective. What would I tell people about how I got the job? That you applied and interviewed like everyone else, which you will. I paused. No one at the company knows about our connection. That's your story to tell, or keep private as you choose. He looked out over the gardens. Considering? I don't want special treatment. You won't get any. In fact, you'll probably have to work twice as hard to prove yourself. I stood, gathering my napkin. Think about it. The position starts next Monday. If you're interested, I'll have HR set up. A formal interview tomorrow. I left him there with Sophie, knowing he needed space to decide. By dinner, he'd given me his answer. 2 days later, he walked into Havenwood Properties headquarters for his interview, wearing a suit I'd never seen before. He must have purchased it himself. It wasn't expensive, but it fit well. He looked like a star. James' first year at Havenwood was a baptism by fire. I made sure he received no special attention. Quite the opposite. His direct supervisor, Martin Reeves, was notoriously demanding. James spent his days buried in zoning regulations, environmental impact reports, and market analyses. On weekends, he worked open houses, setting up signs and brewing coffee for the senior agents. I watched from a distance, never intervening. Each month, I received his performance evaluations along with those of all junior staff. His were consistently excellent, not because he was naturally gifted at real estate, but because he approached each task with the same methodical focus he'd once applied to factory work. He was thorough, reliable, and most importantly, he listened. By his second year, he'd moved into a junior sales position. I happened to be at the main office one afternoon when he was working with a young couple, teachers with a new baby looking for their first home. I observed unobtrusively from the conference room next door. "How's your morning routine?" James was asking them, ignoring the listing sheets spread across the table. "Who gets up with the baby? How long is your commute to school?" The couple exchanged surprised glances. "Well, Sarah usually gets up first with Emma," the husband said. "I handle the evening shift since Sarah needs to grade papers." James nodded, making notes. "And what's the most important room in your current apartment? Where do you spend most of your time?" "The kitchen table," Sarah answered immediately. "It's where I grade, where we eat, where we play with Emma. Tell me about your ideal Sunday," James continued. I watched him build a picture of their life, not their wish list. When they mentioned loving to walk, he eliminated neighborhoods without sidewalks. When they talked about Sarah's mother visiting often, he focused on homes with guest rooms. By the end of the session, he had narrowed their options to 3 houses, all under their budget. None with the granite countertops they thought they wanted, but each perfect for their actual lives. 2 weeks later, they closed on a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood with excellent schools. Their commission was smaller than if James had pushed them toward a more expensive property, but they sent a holiday card that December with a photo of their family on their new front porch. James pinned it to his cubicle wall. Word spread. More clients requested the young guy who actually listens. His colleagues, initially dismissive of the quiet newcomer, began to take notice. By the 3rd year, James had been promoted to senior project manager, overseeing the development of a new community in Jupiter. The Havenwood Shores project was ambitious. 50 homes designed to attract young families priced out of the luxury market but unwilling to sacrifice quality of life. I attended the planning meetings, watching as James transformed from the hesitant man I'd found under that bridge. He commanded respect, not through force of personality, but through competence and empathy. He insisted on green spaces between houses, sidewalks wide enough for strollers, and a community center with childcare facilities. "People aren't just buying houses," he explained to the development team. "They're buying the space between their front door and their neighbors. They're buying the walk to school. They're buying the view from their kitchen window while they wash dishes." His team listened because he'd earned their respect. They knew nothing of his connection to me, nothing of his past. They only knew him as the project manager whose developments consistently sold out because he built communities people wanted to live in. Sophie was 4 now, a bright, curious child who spent her days at Havenwood's corporate daycare center. James had moved them into a modest house about 15 minutes from my estate, close enough for regular visits, but clearly establishing their independence. I respected his need for separation, for building his own life. Our relationship had settled into a comfortable rhythm of Sunday dinners and occasional weeknight visits. I never spoke of Gregory, James never asked. The annual executive meeting was scheduled for the first Monday in October. The company had grown significantly under my leadership, from Spencer's modest home-building business to one of Florida's premier real estate development firms. I'd run it alone for 30 years, longer than Spencer and I had run it together. I was tired. The boardroom was packed that morning. Every vice president, division head, and senior manager was in attendance, all expecting the standard annual review. James sat midway down the long table, his portfolio open, pen ready. At 31, he was one of the youngest senior managers in the company's history, but he'd earned his seat at this table. The room quieted as I took my place at the head of the table. I remained standing, surveying. The faces turned expectantly toward me. These were good people, competent professionals, but only one of them understood what Spencer had built. 30 years ago, I began. My husband Spencer stood in this room and told our then small team that Havenwood wasn't in the business of building houses. We were in the business of building futures. I paused, letting the words settle. Spencer didn't believe in just constructing buildings. He believed in building things that last, foundations for families, legacies of integrity. I moved slowly around the table, making eye contact with each person. For 30 years, I have searched for a successor who shares that vision. Not someone who can read a balance sheet, but someone who understands the value of a front door key in a family's hand. A hushed anticipation fell over the room. Several of the vice presidents straightened in their chairs, expectant looks on their faces. My gaze continued its circuit until it reached James. He was watching me carefully. His expression, curious but unassuming. I have found that person, I continued. Someone who started at the bottom and proved their worth through integrity and an empathy that cannot be taught. The room followed my gaze to James, whose eyes widened slightly in realization. Effective. Today, the new CEO of Havenwood Properties is James Sterling. The silence was absolute. James stared at me, shock evident in every line of his face. Then around the table, expressions shifted from surprise to calculation to acceptance. A few of the vice presidents nodded slowly. They'd worked closely with James, seen his results, his leadership style. The appointment was unexpected, but not inexplicable. James, I said, gesturing to the head of the table. Would you care to say a few words? He stood slowly, collecting himself with a visible effort. As he moved to take my place, he paused beside me. Why? He whispered. Just for me to hear. I met his gaze steadily. Because you are Spencer's legacy, I replied softly. And mine, as James addressed the room, his initial uncertainty giving way to quiet confidence. I took a seat and watched the future of Havenwood take shape. The company would change under his leadership, evolve in ways Spencer and I could never have imagined. But its heart, its understanding of what a home truly means, would remain exactly as it should be. I was in my office at Havenwood Tower reviewing quarterly reports when Margaret buzzed through on the intercom. Mrs. Sterling, there are 2 people in the lobby insisting on seeing Mr. Sterling. They don't have an appointment, but they're quite persistent. Something in her tone caught my attention. Did they give their names? A brief hesitation. A Mr. and Mrs. Gregory Sterling. The name hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't breathe properly. Mrs. Sterling. Should I have security? Escort them out? I gathered myself. No. Tell them Mr. Sterling is unavailable. I'll come down. Are you sure? I'm sure, Margaret. I stood smoothing my skirt with hands that were suddenly unsteady. 30 years since I'd seen my son. I'd imagined this moment countless times, what I would say, what I would do. Now that it was here, I felt strangely calm. The elevator ride to the lobby was 17 floors of memories. Gregory as a toddler running to Spencer with arms outstretched. Gregory at 12, proudly showing his father a model house he'd built for a school project. Gregory at 20, his eyes cold as he explained why he deserved early access to his trust fund. I had seen the change in him, the growing entitlement, the hollow charm. But Spencer had been blind to it. Spencer had loved without reservation, without protection. The doors opened onto the gleaming marble lobby of Havenwood Tower. And there they were. I recognized Gregory immediately despite the years. Thinner, gray at the temples, lines etched deeply around his mouth, but unmistakably, my son. The woman beside him must be Brenda. Both were dressed in clothes that had once been expensive, but now showed signs of wear. They stood near the reception desk, Gregory gesturing emphatically to the security guard. "Don't think you understand who I am. I'm his father. I demand to see him immediately." "As I explained, sir, Mr. Sterling isn't available without an appointment," the guard replied calmly. "Then make an appointment. Tell him his parents are here." I crossed the lobby, my heels clicking against the marble. The sound caught their attention. Gregory turned, irritation clear on his face until he saw me. His expression froze. "Hello, Gregory," I said, my voice remarkably steady. He paled. "Mother." Brenda's eyes widened in recognition. "Alice?" she said, her voice tense, then composing herself with visible effort. "It's been a long time. We've been trying to reach James." "I know why you're here," I interrupted. I looked directly at Gregory. "The news about James's appointment made the business section of several papers. You think there's money to be had. That's not fair," Gregory protested, but weakly. "We're his parents. We have a right." "A right?" I repeated the word like glass in my mouth. "Let's discuss rights, shall we?" "Not here." I turned to the security guard. "Please escort these visitors to Conference Room B and notify Mr. Sterling's assistant that he is not to be disturbed for." "Any reason?" "Yes, Mrs. Sterling." Gregory and Brenda exchanged glances, but followed the guard to the elevators. I took a separate one, needing those few moments alone to compose myself. The conference room was small, with a glass table and 6 chairs. I entered last, closing the door behind me. Gregory and Brenda had seated themselves on one side of the table. I remained standing. "You look well, Mother," Gregory began, his voice taking on that smooth quality I remembered too well. "It's been too long. 30 years, 4 months, and 16 days, I replied, "since the day you emptied our accounts and disappeared." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I know you must be angry." "Angry?" I cut him off. "Anger is a luxury for the living." "I wasn't living, Gregory. We made mistakes," Brenda interjected. "We were young, but we're James's parents. We have a relationship to rebuild." I turned my gaze to her. "A relationship?" My voice was dangerously soft. "Tell me about this relationship. Was it the one where you refused to let your son and granddaughter stay with you when they had nowhere else to go? Or perhaps the relationship where you told James I was dead?" Gregory shifted in his seat. "We had our reasons. Do you know where I found your son?" I asked, leaning forward with both hands on the table. "Under a highway bridge in the rain, his child sick with fever. That's where your relationship left him." Brenda's face flushed. "We were having financial difficulties." "You were having financial difficulties," I repeated, each word precise and sharp. "And your solution was to let your son and his baby live under a bridge?" I straightened, looking directly at Gregory. "Your father died because of what you did to us. Did you know that? The doctor called it a heart attack, but it was a broken heart. Spencer died sitting in his study, staring at the empty safe where our life savings had been." Gregory paled further. I never meant, you didn't mean for him to die." "Perhaps not, but you meant to steal from us. You meant to lie. You meant to use his name to get yourself a position in Seattle." I paused. "Just as you mean to use James now." "That's not fair," Brenda protested. "We've had hardships too. We lost everything in bad investments. We're just trying to reconnect with our son, our family." "Family?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You speak of family? Family doesn't abandon a child under a bridge. Family doesn't build a life on lies that killed their own father." I reached into my pocket and withdrew a folded document, placing it on the table between us. "This is a restraining order. It prohibits both of you from contacting James or Sophie in any way. It also bars you from entering any Havenwood property." I slid another document forward. "This is evidence of the theft from our accounts. The statute of limitations has expired. But should you contest the restraining order, I will ensure this becomes very public." Gregory stared at the papers, then at me. "You can't do this. He's our son." "No," I said simply. "He was your son. You gave up that right when you left him under that bridge." I moved to the door and opened it. 2 security guards waited outside. "These gentlemen will escort you out. If you return, you will be arrested for trespassing." Brenda stood abruptly. "You self-righteous. You think you can just steal our son, buy his loyalty with your money?" I regarded her calmly. "I didn't need to buy anything, Brenda. I simply offered him what you never did, the truth and a choice." Gregory remained seated, looking suddenly old and defeated. "Does he know about what I did to you and Dad?" "Yes," I answered. "I told him everything, and he made his peace with it. And he still took the CEO position knowing it was my father's company." "He took it because it was his grandfather's company," I corrected. "Spencer would have been proud of him." Gregory finally stood. "And you, Mother, are you proud of what you've done, turning my son against me?" "I didn't have to turn anyone against you, Gregory. You did that yourself." I held the door open wider. "Goodbye." They walked out, Brenda with her head high in defiance, Gregory with his shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched as the security guards led them to the elevators, watched until the doors closed, and they were gone. Only then did I allow myself to sink into a chair, my composure finally cracking. I don't know how long I sat there before there was a soft knock at the door. Alice James stood in the doorway, concern etched on his face. "Margaret told me what happened." I straightened, trying to compose myself. "I'm sorry. I should have let you handle it. It wasn't my place." He crossed the room and, to my surprise, took my hand. "It was exactly your place," he said quietly. "You protected your family, just like you've been doing since the bridge." I looked up at him, this man who had somehow become the center of my world. "They'll try again. People like that always do, and we'll handle it together." He smiled slightly. "Sophie's downstairs in the daycare. She made something for you in art class. Do you want to see it?" I nodded, suddenly unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. The view from the CEO's office was spectacular. The city spread out on one side, the ocean stretching to the horizon on the other. The 3 of us stood on the private balcony, Sophie between us, holding both our hands. "Higher," she demanded, and on the count of 3, James and I lifted her up, swinging her between us, her laughter bright and fearless, carried on the sea breeze. At 5, Sophie was all curiosity and energy, her dark curls bouncing as she ran. Back inside to examine the model of the new Havenwood community being built in Orlando. James watched her with a smile before turning to me. "The board approved the Affordable Housing Initiative this morning," he said. "Construction starts next month." I nodded, pride warming my chest. Spencer would have loved that project. "I wish I could have known him," James said quietly. "You do know him," I replied. "Every time you put a family in a home they can afford, every time you choose integrity over profit." I paused. "He lives in you, James. And in her." We both looked at Sophie, who was carefully rearranging the tiny trees around the model houses. Spencer's eyes, Spencer's gentle determination. "I've been thinking," James said after a moment. "The penthouse is too big for just me and Sophie, and that estate of yours has a lot of empty rooms." I glanced at him, surprised. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? He shrugged, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. Sophie misses having breakfast with you, and that commute from Palm Beach is brutal. Havenwood was built for a family, I said softly. It's been waiting a long time to be one again. Sophie bounded, back to us, her attention already captured by something new. Grandma Alice, did you know there are fish in the fountain downstairs? Can we get fish for our pond? Our pond? I caught James's eye over her head, seeing my own emotion reflected there. I think that could be arranged, I told her, smoothing her wild curls. In fact, I think your grandfather would insist on it. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden light across the city. For 30 years, I'd been a ghost in my own life, haunting the spaces Spencer once filled, preserving what was instead of building what could be. Now, with Sophie's small hand in mine and James beside me, I was finally stepping back into the light. The cycle of pain Gregory started had been broken. The legacy Spencer built was secured, and I, Alice Sterling, was no longer a ghost in an empty mansion. I was home. So, that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Would you have forgiven a son like Gregory, or was I right to cut him off? For good? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more stories like mine.